Moria's story of the Bible, 1st Genesis. Hello, I'm Moria, and I'm helping you grow your spirituality. Totally Conquered Genesis, the story of the ancestors of faith. From the beginning of the World Bible Series number 1. Dear Moria family, today we are going to start the story of mankind's greatest story, the Bible. It feels like you are traveling through time, following events thousands of years ago, and discovering God's incredible providence and deep love. I am also very excited to start this first journey for Moria. The first book in the Bible is Genesis. Just like its name, it contains the beginning of everything. How did the world begin? Where did humanity come from? Why do pain and sin exist for us? And how did God love us in all the chaos? All these fundamental questions are answered in Genesis. Genesis is not just an old story. It is God's great love confession that gives us the unchanging truth and eternal wisdom, even to those who live today. Now, let's open the door to time and follow the core events of Genesis. With Moria, from the beginning of the world to the story of the ancestors of faith. 1. The perfect start: creation and the birth of man. Genesis chapters 1 to 2. Genesis begins with a declaration. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Genesis chapter 11. Without any imperfections, only light and darkness were divided by the word of God, and heaven and earth. The sea and the land were created. Grass and trees, the sun and the moon and stars, fish and birds, and all kinds of beasts came to their places one after another. During the 6 days of creation, God rejoiced in the perfection, saying everything was good to see. And the pinnacle of creation was on the 6th day. We are human beings. God created men and women in your image and brought them to life. He made them have peace and happiness in their companionship with God. In the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden was a place of perfect harmony and fullness. 2. Beautiful destruction: the beginning of depravity and sin. Genesis chapters 3 to 4. But this perfect peace didn't last long. Humans were tempted by Satan, and by picking up good and bad results that God forbade, they sinned. And their relationship with God was broken. This case is called human depravity. This leads to being driven out of Eden and pain and death entering the world. Sin continues to pollute human life. In the story of Cain and Abel, the first brothers in mankind, a tragic event occurs in which Cain, who is envious of his younger brother, kills Abel. This shows how deep and deep-rooted the sin is. As the years go by, the world becomes more depraved. As the world is full of sins, such as God's sons seeing the beauty of people's daughters and making them wives, God sighs and decides to judge the world by floodwaters. 3. Promise in judgment: Noah's Ark and the Rainbow Covenant. Genesis chapters 6 to 9. Even in a world filled with sin, God still remembered Noah, a righteous man. God orders Noah to build an ark, and Noah obeys, and burns the male and female of his family and all living things on the ark. It rained 40 weeks and the ground was flooded, but Noah and all life in the ark were safe. After the flood judgment, God made a promise to Noah, his descendants, and all living things that he would never judge the world with water again, and showed them a beautiful rainbow with that token. This is an important symbol of God's wrath that shows that there is still love and mercy. 4. Pride and the new beginning. The Tower of Babel and Abraham's call. Genesis chapters 11 to 12. After the flood judgment, mankind began to thrive again. But again, they fall into arrogance and show signs of rebelling against God. This is because the people tried to raise their names by unifying each other's language and building a tall, Babel tower that touches the sky. God saw human pride and made the language crowded, so that they scattered. This can be seen as a story that explains why human languages and cultures have diversified. The world was still stained with sin and pride, but God plans a new beginning. He chose Abraham to call him. The reed summoned Abraham from the land of idol worship, and made him a great promise to form a great nation with the land of promise. And all nations of the world will be blessed through him. This was the first step in God's great plan for the salvation of mankind. 5. Chiefs of faith: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Genesis chapters 12 to 50. After Abraham's call, Genesis revolves around the story of his descendants, the chiefs of faith. He is the ancestor of faith who believed in and obeyed the promise of God. Although there were mistakes, God faithfully kept the covenant by giving him Isaac, the son of the promise, at the age of 100. The word of God is not a commandment that is difficult for us to keep, but a wonderful passage for us to experience the blessings that have been given to us. Although he lived a peaceful life in succession to his father Abraham's covenant, the conflict with his son Jacob shows another human pain. Cheating his twin brother, Esau, and stealing his blessings. He goes down a rough life path. But he meets and wrestles with God in Bethel and gets a new name, Israel. He gives birth to 12 sons and becomes the ancestor of the 12 tribes of Israel. Among these Jacob's sons, the story of Joseph in particular is a touching drama that marks the end of Genesis. Because of their timing and jealousy, they are sold as slaves to Egypt, and even imprisoned under a framing. However, God is with Joseph and allows him to overcome all adversities with wisdom and patience. 6. Redemption beyond suffering. Joseph, prime minister of Egypt. Chapter 37 to 50 of Genesis. Joseph, who was imprisoned, becomes the prime minister of Egypt in recognition of his ability to understand his dreams, and they save many people's lives by preparing for a bad harvest. When his brothers, who were deprived of food due to a severe famine, come to Egypt to save crops, Joseph dramatically meets them again. Despite long misunderstandings and pains, Joseph forgives the brothers and lets them move Jacob and the whole family to Egypt. Joseph's story clearly shows how God's providence goes beyond human sins and suffering to achieve a great plan of salvation. Even in sin and suffering, God faithfully kept your covenant and preserved the people of faith. Genesis, ask the meaning of every beginning. Dear Moria family, from the beginning of the world to the story of the chiefs of faith and the process of moving to Egypt, we have walked together on the journey of Genesis. Genesis asks us, where do we come from? What is the meaning of life? And what is God like? And through that answer, we realize the following important truths. God's sovereignty and creation. All things began with God's plans and abilities, and He is the subject of history. Human sin and God's judgment. Sin breeds tragedy, but God never overlooks sin. God's promise and covenant. Do not give up the sinner man, but plan for salvation and faithfully keep the covenant. The importance of faith and thoroughness. When you believe in God and obey Him like Abraham, Noah, and Joseph, you can experience His amazing history. Providence and forgiveness in hardship. Like Joseph's life, there is God's goodwill in hardships and adversity, and healing is achieved through forgiveness and reconciliation. Genesis is a great prelude to the source and direction of our lives, and what God we should believe in. In the next session, we will look at how God saves the people of Israel from slavery, following Genesis and the magnificent story of Exodus. I sincerely hope that this Bible story series will serve as a valuable nutrient for your faith and spiritual growth. If you have gained new wisdom and insight through these words today, please subscribe, like, and set notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments. Moria, is preparing to translate this Bible series into English later, so that it can be used as a precious tool to communicate and deliver God's words to more people around the world. I ask for your prayers and attention. Moria's Bible story, please. Look forward to the next episode. Exodus preview. See you again next time. Thank you.